Welcome back to the show, Business Mastery for Startups, Scale-Ups, and Early Stage Businesses, with your host, Jerry Gadori. That's me, and our host, our guest, who you might recognize from a few weeks ago, Marcy Clark. Now, when Marcy joined us last time, she talked about PR firms, how they're different from marketing, and how to work with them. This time, we're going to look a little bit deeper at both what you should look for and the types of questions that a PR firm will ask, both before they've signed or you've signed with them, and also once they've started, to better help empower you to make better decisions on who you work with, as well as, to know what to expect so you'll be prepared. Marcy, what do you have for us today?
Okay. So today we're going to look at 6 questions that a PR firm should ask you to get you press. So when I talk about this, these are questions that you wouldn't expect all of these to be answered in the getting to know you pre-contract phase, right? But you would want to hopefully have at least 2, maybe 3 of these questions or similar asked to you, before they make your contract. You don't want a PR firm that is just happy to just take anybody's money. These are questions that determine what is newsworthy about you. And, some people really know, okay, I have this brand new thing. I have this announcement. We have a partnership. We have investment. Those are obviously newsworthy things, but there's a lot more that I call perennial news, topics that I excavate with my clients when we do my deep intake process with them.
That sounds exciting. I look forward to hearing about it.
Yeah. And so I thought the fun way would be, Jerry, is if I ask you these questions so that you're a little in the hot seat, but, I think it'll be a fun way to do it. And through that process, the audience will get a little sense of how my PR brain works and how we tease out what aspects might be relevant to the press. So I'll try to highlight some of those as we go.
For love of my audience, I will endure your hot seat.
Yes. and if you're listening to this podcast, I invite you to, if you're able, have a pen and paper nearby, write down these questions. You can email me. I can send you them if you want. And, have a think for yourself so that you can go deeper into creating your media ready bio, your media kit, all those good details.
And for new listeners, as always, and experienced listeners know this, Marcy's contact info will be in the show notes. So if you want to reach out to her for clarification on these questions, for the list of them, or anything else, please look in the YouTube notes, the Apple podcast notes, any of those areas.
Yes. All right. So question number 1. So what makes you, Jerry, and your product or service different from others on the market?
That's a great question. So I think what we do differently than other companies is that so little background. So again, those who don't know me can better understand the context here. So I'm a podcaster, I'm an author, but I'm also a consulting firm owner. My company, Redbeard Solutions, implements what we call the destination employer methodology, which is also the name of my book. And really that methodology is espoused within it. You can see it on Amazon. But the short version is we help startups, early stage businesses, and small businesses to build the people side of their business. What's unique about us beyond 25 years of experience building companies is that we take the entire talent acquisition, recruitment, and retention pipeline and create one unified, comprehensive process And by connecting them in that way, we get a lot of synergy. So our retention is better than industry standards. Our recruitment better than industry standards. Starting off with our attraction phase and building an employer brand really empowers that. So that cohesive plan is the big game changer for us.
Yes. And I also noted when I was looking at your site, and um something I really appreciated on Redbeard Solutions is it shows the you have it written out like possible plans, how it works, how the payment schedule is really different, how it's like public relations, right? It's a retainer, it's a longer relationship, it's much more full service, right? It's not you know here, please, accept this candidate and I can get my lump sum payment, and then the transaction's done, right? This is yeah, it's not that method. It is really about a relationship building, trust, and in the long run, you made the case about how much money the company is going to save by having you on their team, as external to internal HR. So
Yes,
yeah, so I
great
love that.
observation. Yep.
Yeah, so I think that is, that model, the difference in the model, I think is a really important, would be a really important point of difference. And, something I would want to, how I'd want to highlight that in the media might be to talk about what's wrong, what's broken in, the traditional model, and how, and then, using your book as scaffolding, as, ideas as part of your bona fides, right? Then that will help us, in positioning you as an expert. So, which we'll get more into that in a little bit.
No, I
All right.
appreciate that
So,
observation because that's also a part of our differentiation. So for those of you that have ever worked with a traditional staffing firm, the majority utilize what's called a contingency model, where they get paid a percentage of the first year salary for the folks they place. Our firm, because we do much more than just staffing, we do employer brand work, retention, strategizing, leadership coaching. That package is an annual program that's broken out with monthly payments. And the reason for the difference, very simply, is that first model, the contingency model, it incentivizes speed over quality, and it creates an almost mercenary relationship between the vendor and their client. Our model is designed over time so that we can empower you, the startup founder or business leader, with the ability to do things on your own. And then our programs are structured such that what degree that we're involved in doing them for you on your journey to learning is how much we charge. But even our most expensive programs still wind up saving our clients over 50% over contingency staffing. And that's a whole story for another day. And if you'd like to talk to me about it, reach out. But that's why we changed the model. Our model incentivizes long-term success. The contingency model incentivizes speed over quality.
yes, sometimes in PR, people like to make an analogy between a popular business model that we're aware of, and this current one, right? You might hear people say the Uber for, you know, private jets or something like that, right?
Yes.
You hear about like that. So in this case, it's making me think about the companies that have like the lifetime guarantee for their umbrella or their suitcase or some of their gear. I don't know if I feel like Eddie Bauer had that for certain things, or Lens, right? Some of these companies that they have these long-term guarantees. So I feel like that's that kind of feeling that they get from working with you. So that dovetails into our next question, which is how do clients and customers get to feel when they're interacting with your business? So and an add-on to that would be like, is there a way that you're taking care of clients or meeting their needs that makes your company significantly better?
Yeah, absolutely. So this again is a question that points to our way of doing business. And two-part answer. The first is that cohesive plan that touches every aspect of a person's interaction with your company from the first time they ever see your employer brand straight through the exit interview when they leave your organization. That comprehensive plan really creates an efficient program that outperforms industry standards by orders of magnitude. The second part is, because we're there for the long haul, we can take the time to ensure that the methodology we implement sinks in. So for many of you that have been involved in any type of a change management process, you'll know that the key to success is effective, consistent communication and consistent retention until the new thing becomes the old thing, till the old workflow is replaced in habit by the new one. And by having that year-long engagement, we take care of that.
That's great. That's great. And I imagine as well with the continued engagement, then if as people are leaving in their exit interviews, right, they're giving feedback to HR, this was too fast paced for me. This was too, I didn't like, that, it was such a focus on results when, I felt like my other work wasn't appreciated, stuff like that, which is sometimes that's a case with certain companies, right? Or they have all different, every company has different cultures. And so, one thing, you had told me in another conversation was that it's very much about, the authenticity, right? So there's that authenticity between, from the whole process. And so what I love about that is that, the people being recruited through your process, they get to feel like they're dealing with a plain dealer, an honest person, an honest team, and they get, that hand holding, what they're told at the beginning. It's fast paced. It's about results. Those are fine if you know in advance this is what it is, right?
Exactly. You mentioned a couple things I'd like to expand on real quick. So, our destination employer program is all about making sure the company develops a reputation in the marketplace as a location for top talent to maximize their careers. We then break that down to three phases: the attract phase, the recruit phase, and the retention phase. When you describe the exit interview, that unsurprisingly is the end of the process. That information needs to find its way back if it's consistent. Now, of course, we don't change everything over every single item,
Yeah.
but if we see consistent messaging that maybe the way we're presenting the company is different than it really is, we have to adjust our employer brand so that the people that would be drawn to that true environment like it, and the people that wouldn't are pushed away. Just like any other type of marketing, it should pull and push. It should pull your ideal prospect or candidate in our case, and push your others. So that's critically important. I talk about it in phases, but if I was to draw it as an image, it would be a circle.
It's great. It's great. So, what feedback do you get from clients that keeps you going?
Yeah, it's a two-parter. So this is going to be a mystery to no one who's been involved in the job market or building a business over the last 5 or so years. But the ability to keep people's attention is getting harder and harder. We read and see these nightmares like about quiet quitting and the Great Resignation and quiet vacations and all of these things. Those are all engagement problems. And the feedback
Mm,
I'm getting from my clients is that by implementing our methodology, they aren't having those problems. Why? Because the leadership framework we teach, engage, fulfill, and grow, it kills it. And
mm,
because in a truth in advertising perspective, we're making sure we understand the true culture in our company and what it's like to work there. And those things are being reflected in our employer brand. When people come in the door, they know what to expect and they get it. Is it perfect? Nothing is. But we're getting more than double the average retention rates. And if you're going to build a successful business, I say this jokingly often, but it's a heck of a lot easier to fill a bucket than it is a colander.
that's great. That's great. So, a few things I would pull out of that for our, our PR efforts, right? So, one would be that, the statistic you had, right? About, the double the retention rates, right? That's like that you want to highlight immediately. And then you go into maybe a client case study or a testimonial, right? Including a third party endorsement within my media pitch, right? And then what I want to pull out would be kind of some of, and this might even be like the headline of the article that I would pitch, right? Would be, um, you know, how the exit interview helps, informs the position, the description of the new role, right? Or something, like what, the exit interview is king, or something like that, So if I'm pitching people that are writing about HR, they're writing about business, they're writing about retention, I want a headline, that's like something I'm always thinking about is what are headlines where it's a little bit subverting expectation, right? We think it's all about, like the front end. How do you get people in? How do you take care of them? The soft stuff. We spent so much time as a culture thinking about, massage and, nap pods and those things are nice. But now we've learned actually people really just want to be treated like grown-ups. They want to have free time when they need it. There's different values, but the exit interview, really often drives home how, being treated with respect and having a good manager is the most essential.
An interesting quick note on that: exit interviews are wildly unpopular, as are employee reviews. But the reason for that, very simply, is most organizations do them wrong. An
Mm,
employee review and an exit interview should be about that person's experience. Now, in the case of employee reviews, obviously we're measuring their ability to do their job.
yeah.
But as much as is possible, you want to do that through the lens of that person's development. We want to make it about their success. We want to turn our KPIs and metrics into their success and what they're looking to achieve. And the better we can tie that together, the more fulfilled that they're going to feel. When it comes to exit interviews, and again, this goes back to reputation, but by
Yes.
developing a culture in our company where if Marcy has been with us and she's reached the cap of her growth with our company, her skills are where they're going to be. We've nothing more to offer her. Her responsibilities are where they're going to be. We've got nothing more than to offer her. That's a natural breaking point. If Marcy wants to continue to grow, she has to leave. So it's incumbent on us as an employer either A, to find a way to continue that growth. And if we can't do that, which, spoiler alert, we usually will not be able to, but if we can't do that, we want to make that exit graceful and easy. Marcy shouldn't be punished because we don't have the role she needs anymore. And a lot of companies treat that like a defection when somebody leaves. And
Mm,
that's why exit interviews wind up a bad thing. Done right, they're of value to both parties.
that's great. That's great. Yeah. So, like headline wise, I would be thinking about, maybe five questions that you want, essential questions you want to ask in an exit interview, to improve your company experience, to or improve your employee retention, right? Or what what everyone's getting wrong about exit interviews, right? So this is just one small aspect of the business, but this would be an example of taking, a micro element of a store of, your work and make bringing it into a bigger conversation, right? So in PR, I'll pitch a mixture. It might be a macro story, something about, I might pitch you for stories about, the HR trends overall, what's happening in general, layoffs, new jobs, what's available, what are employers seeking, general macro story. Or I might pitch, a micro story where we're looking at just one piece, like the the lack of how the lack of transparency is hurting employer retention, and the hiring process hurts employer retention. That would be like one piece of this big process you have. So yeah. All right.
Awesome.
Okay, so question 4. So as I'm positioning you, Jerry, as the expert, right, for your company, and that's my specialty, is positioning CEOs and founders as experts. So I would want to get into not just, your current expertise, what you're doing now, but I like to know, what were you doing before you started this business? Maybe I'm looking for, is there a through line to your career? Maybe an interesting story. Some clients have even told me, gone back to, you know, I had an interior designer who, would always go to, antique markets and everything with her dad when she was a little girl. Like her whole life, she was looking for and curating beautiful things. So I'm even going back to childhood, if that feels relevant to you. So it's an
Sure. I
open-ended
would say,
question, but I want to hear more about you, Jerry.
sure. So I think where my story starts as related to this would be my time in the Marine Corps. So I did signals intelligence in the Marine Corps, held a top secret SCI clearance there.
Mm.
My time in the Marines really rekindled my love of technology. After the Marines, I became a technical recruiter, which is where a lot of my direct recruitment experience, of course, comes from as it relates to Redbeard. I went from technical recruiter to technical sales to branch manager to region manager. I ran the New England market for Kelly IT. And in those days, I was a $6 million business.
Wow.
From there, I moved into consulting. I worked for a friend of mine as his principal consultant. So at doing that, I did sales training, recruiter training, management training, sales and recruitment fractional management. Then I started my first company, Influence Understood. The focus there, though I did some sales and recruiter training, was really more on the management and ownership side. My time with my first job at Menemsha Group, the principal consultant job, really taught me that the majority of problems in technology services, which is where I was focused back then, were in the
Hmm.
leadership and owner space. That's where where most of these problems were initiated, and frankly where they stopped. So that was my primary focus. And as part of that, that job matured into me taking senior executive roles in companies for a period of time to get them past the hurdle. While doing that, I became the president of a company called Apicero. And in just 5 years, we went from 2 people, no office, nothing, through 9 offices in 3 countries, and a $250 million acquisition by NTT Data.
Wow.
So that was super, super exciting. And I learned so much in that period of time. And I hope this doesn't sound like an exaggeration. I worked about 80 companies, but I learned more in that 9 or so years than I did in all my time before that. Having the opportunity to work closely with founders of everything from little, 500K companies straight up through publicly traded companies, I just got an insight into what works and what doesn't work. And all of that together is what I wrote the book Destination Employer from. And then when Destination Employer hit #1 on Amazon and was really successful, I used that material to create the Destination Employer Academy at
Hmm.
destinationemployer.co. So that's a self-paced program for those founders and business owners that want to learn this on their own. And then I pivoted Redbeard Solutions, which prior to that was focused on cybersecurity and technology staffing and solutions work, to implementing the Destination Employer methodology. And that's really how we got where we are today.
It's an amazing life story. I'm hearing a lot of things within that. I'm hearing with the company that you grew. I think how many employees? It started at 2. How many employees did it get up to?
2,500. So I
2,500.
understand scale. And a real quick note on that, for you folks out there that are still small and you're starting to get to that hockey stick stage, it is such an incredible ride. It's exciting, but it's taxing. And I want to point out one kind of cautionary tale here, real quick.
Yeah.
Your company's growth will stop at your development rate, at your ability rate. So as a founder or business leader, it's
Hmm.
critical that you keep growing, keep learning. Otherwise, you will halt your company's growth.
Yes, yes. I mean, I think that's a really interesting that's an interesting angle by itself, right? That's a rich angle. Like the skills you need for a 100-person company, right? Where you might be able to recognize everybody, learn their names. That's very different than, a 2,000, 3,000, 20,000 person company. The skills are different. The team members you need, the skills they need to have, that's all different. So,
100%.
I think that's a really rich area. I think, um, leading in hyper growth, right? That is an area of expertise that you have that is, that's really rich. There's a gazillion stories we could come up with just from that area. And then I'm hearing, with your background, going from being a Marine with top secret security clearance. And, I'm sorry if I'm getting terminology wrong, but,
Oh, you're good.
with high security clearance and then, working, having that specialty in placing security personnel that you need to trust them. It's such a deep level. So within that, it's like, that's an organization that's known for really weeding out people that are not of really high integrity and work ethics. So you have, through being a Marine with that work specialty and then going into, a consulting role with that same specialty, and where you have to also show that similar, the really deep integrity to be the best in your business. Those are kind of through lines. Those are, aspects of your background that really carry a lot of weight. Um, so I think it's great. I think, the variety of companies you've worked with is really interesting. There's a lot of numbers. When I'm writing a pitch, when I'm writing, offering headlines, when I'm talking to a journalist, I want to use numbers because, and, not just statistics, but, from 2 employees to 2,500 or, worked with 800 companies, numbers like that. It does a few things. It breaks up the text. It shows, this is not just, a new business, this is a really established, this is, a senior expert in their field. And, it just attracts the eye. When you're looking at a pitch, right? I'm looking at the eye scans, and how it works is you're looking at maybe the first line, scan a little, you're looking for capitalized words, proper nouns, names of companies, lists, and the eye scans on and lands on numbers and percentages as well. And then often, if you're looking at a paragraph, your eye will look at kind of the last sentence or the last, line of that as well. So these are things, I know from my 25 years, in the industry, how I'm looking at that.
No, that's great. And I'll tell you, numbers make things real. If I use softwares like big or small or hard or easy, those are too subjective. My
Yes.
big at 100 might be your small, depending on the environment you come from. So yes, numbers make everything real.
Yes. Yes. Okay. All right. So now I would want to ask you, what well, I guess we kind of just covered this, but um, my question I always ask is, what has your current endeavor and your previous work made you an expert in? So this is kind of what we've been teasing out, the whole time is, this making your company a destination that people want to work for. You're an expert in security, staffing. You're an expert in, um, retention. You're an expert in, the whole process, reinventing the process. You're an expert in, the financials and what's working and not working about the, employee, the recruiting pipeline, right? So I think there's a lot. Are there any other aspects of, your leadership style, your understanding of sales, or, other pieces you would want to share with CEOs and entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So you've mentioned security a few times, and that was an area we focused on. We work in all areas of business now
Mhm.
because the destination employer methodology is business vertical agnostic. But saying all of those things, really, when you strip everything away, what I specialize in is building and leading highly performing teams that 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 produce consistently over an extended period of time. And if you're growing an organization, you need that. Your team and stories about your team should create raving customers for your company and keep your competitors up at night. Those two things aren't happening, then there's room for improvement.
That's great. Yeah. So I love how your focus is on your employer's success and their bottom line, right? Not just finding an employee that ticks boxes and, you know, is ready to go, but somebody who's, you know, actually going to succeed there and improve their bottom line. So that's great.
That's key. I
Um,
mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've got to say, I've seen far more bad matches than I have bad candidates and bad companies. And it's an
mhm.
avoidable mess, but when you
Yeah.
make that mistake, everyone loses. So
Yep.
it's the most important thing to avoid.
Yeah. So, my last question that I ask people is, why is now the moment for this business? And why is now the moment for you, Jared?
Oh my gosh. I'll tell you, of all the questions you've asked, that might be the easiest one to answer. So
Mhm.
as of this recording, it's fall of 2024. We've got a world that's preparing for an AI revolution. We're still recovering from the pandemic. Our inflation rate, regardless of what we're being told by the government, is still sky high, and we all feel that. Money is still a mess as far as business is concerned, getting investment and such. And if that's not enough, it's an election year in the United States, which always makes everything kind of crazy. All of that uncertainty makes business difficult. And you might be tempted, especially with all the layoffs that we're hearing about, to think that recruitment and team building has never been easier. But nothing is further from the truth. Number one, top talent always has options. And that's what we're here to talk about, top talent. Number two, all of that uncertainty causes fear inside of your organization as well. It doesn't make
Mhm.
people less of a flight risk, it makes them more of a flight risk. Because if they get the slightest whiff or idea that there's a problem in your company, they're going to start putting out their feelers so they have a plan B if something bad happens. Adding to everything I've said, trust in the United States is at bargain basement levels. Trust in government, trust in business, trust in any large institutions. So these folks are coming from a place of distrust. So, what Destination Employer is all about is building your reputation as a place for these folks to be. And by doing that, you're insulating yourself, you're insulating your team, and you're insulating your customers from all the madness that I described. I can't think of a better time to put in this energy to make sure that you've got a killer employer brand, you've got killer recruitment processes, killer offer processes, and the folks in your organization, because you listen to them so they feel heard and valued. You've ensured throughout the recruitment process that their personal values match your company's and your goals aligned, and you're seeing to their skill growth and responsibility. Because those things are in place, you're incentivizing them to stay, which is a whole lot of words to say you don't have retention problems. I can't think of a better time.
Yes, because it's very expensive, right? If you have
Yes.
to, if you're not seeing and understanding that, there is, fear maybe coming from top down or coming from, some badly placed, managers or whatever the case, right? If there's no awareness of this, no cognizance of it, it can be extremely expensive if you have, employees jumping ship because they feel they feel, insecure. They don't feel like they're getting that fair shake.
And Marcy, keep this in
Mhm.
mind. We're talking about the top talent, especially. So, for
Yes.
business owners, here's a short exercise for you to do. If you're a company with 20 or fewer people, imagine the two top performers in your entire company leave abruptly. What does that mean to you?
Mm,
If you're a larger company, imagine the one top performer in each one of your teams leaves. What does that mean to your company? And that should
yeah.
be all the incentive you need to understand just how important this is.
Yeah. To look at, yeah, what's a different way to approach this. Yeah, I think there could even be a media PR angle around, if why, you know, um, economic fears, you know, uh, make, top talent, create the biggest risk for top talent to leave. Something
Absolutely.
something around that. I think that's an interesting angle that, people aren't really talking about. So I think that's a great, area of expertise that you have.
Yeah, and I don't like to fearmonger, so don't
No.
misunderstand my intent when I say do that exercise. But
Yeah.
our business culture venerates the founder, but rarely looks one layer under at the incredible people that really cause that explosive growth. What would
That's
Apple be without Wozniak? So
yeah.
imagine for a minute in your company, your Wozniak leaves because you're not communicating effectively, or they're getting a bad feeling about the business, or they're seeing a lot of employee churn and wondering if they're next. What would that
Yes.
have meant to Apple had Wozniak left? What would that mean to you if your top folks left? And that's what this is all about, preventing that.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're
This
welcome.
was really I loved learning about Redgrid Solutions and your book. So I hope I provided for you and for the listener some PR questions to, get in the frame of mind of thinking about approach press. How do I what conversations are relevant that I want to bring to the media. It can't be generic. That's the main
Mhm.
thing I want to hit home. I go really deep in my, in these conversations with clients, because if you're pitching just a generic story, like, I'm sorry,
Yeah, why would they
the
buy it or
yeah,
write
why
about
does
it?
the Wall Street Journal want to talk to you if you're just, a generic, oh, I have a great recruiter for you to talk to, even just being a big company having a lot of clients, that is in and of itself, you aren't if you aren't presenting novel ideas to go with your bona fides, they can't trust that you're somebody that can think on your feet, answer dynamic questions, and give them, at the end of the day, what the media is looking for is they're looking for a quote that is thoughtful, that is maybe a little, pithy or edgy, right? That has some, maybe some metaphor or some personification, has some personality to it. Something that, you want to learn how to think in headlines. So that's what I'm an expert in, is thinking in headlines and translating, my clients' expertise into headlines.
So that's awesome. And this is totally unscripted. So I'm putting Marcy on the hot seat now.
Yeah.
So if she looks surprised, folks, it's fair. So I answered 6 questions for you. Let me ask one back.
Yes.
So you do what we just did. Some of it maybe a little bit before the engagement starts, some of it at
Mhm.
the beginning once the engagement starts. Now that you've got all this data, what is your next step? How do you engage with the media side of this to turn all this into articles and news pieces and whatnot?
Great question. So when I have a conversation like this, right, and it might even go, I might do two of these with a client, right, to go even deeper. But I start writing down during this process. I start writing down two main areas of notes. So one is going to be all of these headline ideas, right, and then I'm also writing down media segments. So what are the media lists that I want to start pulling. So I start pulling these media lists. I start looking at, you know, um, you know, uh, what, magazines, what newspapers, if you're an alum of Harvard, right? Maybe I want to, pitch Harvard Business Review for somebody. If they're, you know, yeah, even if they're an alum of, Cal Poly, I had, a friend, helped get them a article in Cal Poly and figure out what to talk about with that, with their magazine. So I want to look at, the magazines, the newspapers, all of these kind of and usually I'm pitching slightly different headlines to different news organizations, and different types of media. So we call, a genre of press, we call it what the people write about, we call it a beat. So for you, I might be looking at who's covering the, HR beat. If I'm looking at more macro, if I'm looking at trade publications, maybe we're pitching guest articles for you, right? Offering you for that. If I'm pitching podcasts, that's, getting you on a bunch of podcasts. I'm sure you are on several on the regular. That those are slightly, different headlines. And for that, I might be pitching some that are focused on entrepreneurs, small, business people, right? Others that are focused on, talking directly to CEOs, people at, medium to larger organizations. And if I'm pitching you for television, that's again, I'm making a separate media list and I'm pitching you very differently depending on if it's, the business org or if it's, the mainstream news desk, right? So those are, there's probably going to be a little more play on the business side, but there's times when there's overlap and they need an expert like yourself for these different areas. I'm also paying attention, and I might pull like between this first call we have, I might pull a bunch of news articles and say, hey, this is what I'm seeing, or hey, I just saw this statistic that 1/3 of employees are worried about, in tech are have worries about, layoffs. And, you know, Google is, doing kind of funny things like I heard recently they have a policy that if you arrive past 9 a.m., they cancel all your meeting spaces for the day. Right. Like,
Wow.
they're kind of doing death by a thousand cuts type things,
We used to
and
jokingly, and joking's not the right word, but we used to refer to those as attrition layoffs, where people
yes.
just make it unpleasant for folks and they choose to leave and then they don't backfill the roles.
Yeah, and I think that's really common. So it's looking at, kind of looking at news headlines and how do we pitch based on that too. So I start making a plan based on, all of these different kinds of angles, all these different possible pitches. And then I start, making my own editorial calendar for how I'm going to pitch you based on what we think is, and my, years of experience, what I think is the strongest angles. And then I move forward, with each of these segments and tweaking the pitches, for each. And I'm very much hitting the ground running. So I will, get your bio. I'll get a press release if you have a big news announcement for you, but I'm not papering my clients to death. You're not going to see every pitch before it goes out, but you're going to approve all the basic language, and you're going to, trust that, you're going to have the angles run by you before I start pitching.
That's awesome. I
Yeah.
think that's great. And I thank you for coming back on, by the way.
Yeah.
Normally
Pleasure.
I would ask here for your contact info, but we already have it since you've been on before.
Yep.
So for
MarcyCarpPR.com.
exactly right. So for folks watching again, that will be in the show notes. I think this is a good place to wrap up today. So for anybody out there in audience land, as we always say, have a great week, make something awesome, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks again, Marcy. Deeply appreciate you coming back on.
Thank you, Jerry. My
You're welcome.
pleasure. Thankful. Okay. Bye.